I literally just about finished my DIY 3D printer, but when TwoTrees reached out and asked if I wanted to review the new version 3 of their Sapphire Plus 5, after watching an hour-long review of the previous version, I was actually intrigued enough to say yes. Now on this channel, I only want to review products I would personally be interested in owning, so the fact that I have it sitting here on the bench shows this printer somehow managed to catch my attention in the ever-growing sea of copycat minimalist designs out there. So let's take a look at what they put together and what makes this thing tick. The SP-5 version 3 is a larger coreXY style machine with a build volume of 300 by 300 by 350 millimeters and a theoretical maximum print speed of 300 millimeters per second. As opposed to the previous model, version 3 now also comes with a direct drive extruder in a reverse balanced setup, allowing flexible filaments because direct drive is just plain better. TwoTrees also changed the controller board to a Robin Nano V3 with TMC 2208 separate motor drivers, which make the motors virtually inaudible at low speeds and take out the annoying separate motor whine at normal and high print speeds. Oh, and it runs on Marlin now. Anyway, let's see what's in the box. As expected, we get instructions in English and Chinese to help with assembling it, 4 pieces of aluminum extrusion that make up the frame, the side pieces with the Z-axis rails already mounted on the first layer of foam. More about those linear rails in a bit. Underneath, we get a USB cable for hooking it up to the computer, and all the hardware needed for assembly in neatly labeled Ziploc bags. There's also an SD card and USB adapter thrown in with the flush cutters and Bowden tube, a teeny tiny filament spool to test with, and the thick aluminum brackets that the print bed sits on. The second one is actually slid into a nifty cutout in the foam block. And there is the coreXY top part of the gantry, already fully assembled with the extruder and hot end. Underneath more foam, there is the heated bed. It's an aluminum core PCB heater with some cotton insulation and the adhesive glass build plate. And finally, here we have the base with the touchscreen on the front. There is also some more aluminum extrusion, plastic covers to keep the cables inside the slot, and the Z-axis lead screws. That's it. Everything looks really good. They fixed all the belt issues they had on the previous version, and the heated bed now also has a proper strain relief where the cable connects to it. On the previous version, it was just the wire dangling off the bare solder joint, which I would have expected to break fairly easily, but now it's a rock solid strain relief screwed into the heated bed itself. Anyway, what I really wanted to talk about is this printer comes with real linear slide rails on all axes. That is what really stood out to me because you don't normally get linear slide rails on mid-range printers like this one. It does come at a cost, you don't get auto bed leveling instead, but it stands to reason if your gantry is sturdy enough, you shouldn't need to level your bed every single time. I shouldn't be talking about auto bed leveling since I haven't yet experienced the convenience of it, but in my books, this gantry is rock solid and the linear bearings have no perceivable backlash whatsoever. Before we assemble it though, let's take it fully apart first, because it wouldn't be my video if we didn't take a peek at what's inside first. Okay, seems they're still rocking the belt for linking the Z-axis motors. I quite like linked Z-screws since you can't accidentally bump one motor and get the entire gantry misaligned, but linking 2 separate Z-axis motors is definitely an unusual approach, and I've been thinking about why they're doing it. Because usually when you do linked Z-screws, you just use one bigger motor and put a bearing on the other side. However, I came to the conclusion it might actually be more economical to just use a second small motor instead of a bigger NEMA 23 on one side and concocting some kind of custom pillow bearing block for the other, because usually the motor comes with bearings. I also want to take a look at the new extruder and hot end assembly, and since those belts need more tensioning, I have to take off those covers anyway. Well, there it is, all the wiring, 3 fans, the heat break fan is on the other side. Those air ducts are actually 3D printed, which I think is cool. There's the limit switch, or end stub, whatever you want to call it. The hot end does seem to be PTFE lined. Whether that's good or bad, I guess, is up to personal preferences. I don't mind either. I kind of want to take apart the extruder as well, but seeing how complex it is, I don't think that's quite necessary right now. Either way, there is the filament runout sensor right here. To tension the belts, I just loosen the zip tie, pull on the end, and zip it back together. Anyway, let's assemble it and see how it prints, shall we? Honestly, this thing is built like a tank. If I push against it, the only thing rocking is my table saw. I wish they would build washing machines this rigid, but those are all plastic. Have I mentioned how impressed I am with the stiffness of the gantry? I was kind of worried about the linear bearing being so far away from the nozzle because of the mechanical disadvantage it creates, but even so, when I try to deflect it, there is almost no give before the axis starts moving against the resistance of the motors. Also, because people like to complain about things like instructions not being good, I honestly found these to be totally sufficient. I didn't even look at them very often because, with a little bit of common sense, it's pretty self-explanatory how everything goes together, especially since most of the screws came in a bag with the very part you're supposed to use them on. Anyway, let's fire it up and see what happens. On the screen you can do pretty much all the usual, so let's try homing it. All. Those motors are really quiet. The fans are the loudest. And that is it! Homing successful! Let's try leveling the bed. Point 1, point 2, can we take a second to appreciate that 3D printers come with an SD card and USB adapter? On pretty much all other devices you have to buy the SD card separately. On phones they even take away the slot for them, and here they're included. According to the manual, there should be a test file on it, so let's try and print it. Okay, printing. There it is. And print this model. And it starts printing. It is indeed very quiet. That looks really good. That is neat. Those motors are definitely virtually silent, which is pretty impressive. And it just finished what I can confidently call the most perfect XYZ calibration cube I've ever seen. Let's take a look. That is fresh off the printer. The X looks absolutely perfect. I don't see any ringing, absolutely nothing. There's a teeny tiny layer shift on the Y, but sides really look good. The top needs a little bit of work, but this is really good. Let's see the measurements. Those could do with a little bit of adjusting, but they are consistent on both sides, which they should be given it's a coreXY. All I can say is,
summon the demon from the dark of the Banshee, almighty forces of the underworld, or else our souls shall perish in the deepest agony of drowning molten filament.
Okay, and while this is printing, let me show you the slicer configurations. On the included SD card, there was a zip folder with not only a full instruction video on how to assemble the SP5, in case you do need more than the pamphlet. Yes, it deals with the previous version printer, but much of the frame stayed the same, so it's pretty much applicable to version 3 as well. There is also videos on how to install the slicer and slice a model, and most importantly, the config files for Cura and Prusa Slicer. I use Prusa Slicer, so I simply imported it as a new profile and was ready to go. Plonk the Banshee on there, slice it up, and send it to the SD card. That was pretty much default settings. I guess something could be adjusted very slightly to reduce stringing, but honestly I didn't even check whether retraction was enabled or not. Other than that, considering this is what it did right out of the box, without any tuning on my side, I think this is really good. I also immediately went ahead and printed a Maker's Muse style tolerance gauge, and all but the 0.1mm tab were free to move. The 0.15mm one did take some gentle persuasion to break loose, but after that it moved freely as well. The fact that the 0.1mm one didn't move isn't at all surprising really, since that is a very ambitious level of accuracy to ask from FDM printers in general. The original Maker's Muse gauge only ever went down to 0.15 because 0.1 is just never really gonna happen when you're squirting strings of molten plastic on top of each other like log cabins. Now, I'm really nitpicking here. This is just the factory settings. Of course it can be optimized, but TwoTrees clearly put some effort into those slicer profiles so you can actually put the machine straight to work, getting some more than decent results out of it. Like, I personally would be totally content with this print quality for 99% of what I do. TwoTrees also sent me some filament. I guess they rightfully didn't want me to present their printer with my green PLA here, which is so waterlogged it literally sputters and crackles during extrusion, which is certainly enough to make the best 3D printer in the world look bad. So I guess we need something other than Banshees to print. Which shouldn't be hard since I have an overflowing screw collection in this compartment tray here. There is more screws stored in bottle caps in plenty of those drawers, and I have even more bottle caps full of screws in this shelf here. So let's print a really big organizer box for them all and many more to come. I designed those stackable organizers with a common lid, dimensions so you can fit exactly 2 of them on a 300 by 300 millimeter print bed. That way I can print 1 box with its lid and 2 more boxes in a second run. Link to those on my Thingiverse in the description. I'm also gonna double the feeds and speeds to at least make it not take quite as long, and like any good scientist, I'm gonna change 2 variables at once and reduce the temperature by 5 degrees to alleviate stringing, because it does seem to be a little hot for this filament. Let's see what that does. In case earlier I made it look like the prints got stuck to the bed, after letting everything cool off, they literally just sit on there waiting to be picked up. Those didn't turn out quite as perfect as the Benchy. I was definitely sloppy leveling the bed, which fortunately straightened out alright, and those diagonal lines gave me a real headache. I have no idea where those come from. Guess it would be great if I actually knew what I was doing. Maybe I wouldn't have used a print this large as a first test on an unfamiliar, untuned printer. For the most part though, this is still really good. Either way, I printed 1 more at tripled speed settings, which, if anything, turned out better for some reason, and it only took 4 hours. And the idea is those trays have a little latch on each corner so they can be stacked and locked together like this, and the upper one can be covered with the lid, like so, and you've got a little screw organizer. And that's all my screws taken care of with room to spare. Honestly, this is awesome. It's exactly what I needed for such a long time. The amazing thing with this expandable system is, whenever I inevitably run out of empty compartments in those trays, I can simply print another one and add it to the stack. But with Halloween so close, we couldn't just end this video without printing at least a little bit of Halloween knick-knack. I found this set of absolutely adorable emoji face ghosts that I absolutely need to have on printables, as well as a bigger one to be lit up by an LED tea light, and this amazing black crow with LED eyes on Thingiverse, and of course a few spiders. I'll start off with the tea light ghost using the 0.2mm speed setting, though speed doesn't necessarily mean it's a lot faster than standard, it's mostly just the infill. Also, huge props to the people who actually designed this stuff. I would never be able to model something with this level of complexity. As you might have seen, my CAD design capabilities are rather basic. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is one impeccable ghost. I mean, I guess it's a rather simple print overall, but I cannot find a single artifact to complain about, and being able to just turn on the printer and get parts like this out of it is nothing to be sneezed at. I may have gone just a little bit too far into the corner of the bed with this one. For the emoji ghosts, I'm printing those all at once with a brim like you're supposed to, though I feel like I could potentially get away without, and for some reason on printables it says they take 28 hours. Mine only took 8 hours using the speed setting. Okay, so the brim I think definitely would not have been vital. There is more stringing than before, but I did have the nozzle temperature back up to the default settings, so that doesn't surprise me. This time, however, I was smart enough to put the seam on the back. So yeah, this one's eyes turned out really good. They are so cute. This one's like, yay! Of course, I don't want to print an albino crow, so here I have some black G-Tech PLA. Let's see how the SP-5 copes with it. This time I printed a temperature tower because without preset to go from, I'm kinda lost. But that result doesn't exactly tell me a whole lot other than the G-Tech filament is definitely lower quality than what TwoTrees makes, which I already knew. Anyway, let's use 195 degrees and do the spiders first. Because they are rather small, I'm using the 0.1mm layer height setting to get a bit more of the detail across. I don't have arachnophobia, but the sheer size of these makes them low-key terrifying. Like, that's the biggest size of spiders we usually get here, and the other ones are considerably larger. And those turned out perfect as well. I did expect them to come with cobwebs, but I virtually didn't get any stringing at all. And the 0.1mm layer height is awesome. I might just use that all the time now. The idea behind those spiders is they get printed flat on the bed to get some adhesion, and then you bend the legs with hot air to make them sit like a real spider. Though if you don't want to bend them, from a few feet away they're still convincing enough for a good prank. I like them so much, I've actually got a second batch printing right now. Right, now the amazing Halloween crow by Dan Mann on Thingiverse. Now this crow was meant to be printed in vase mode, but when I went to slice it, I found that to be asking for trouble. The tail had the tips of some feathers missing, and the feet were completely messed up, with Prusa Slicer outputting what amounts to garbage, a few perimeters hanging mid-air, and the rest missing entirely. So instead I took the liberty to print it with 2 perimeters and 0 infill. Uses twice as much filament, but at least the result should hopefully be decent, which I really needed to be because I did scale the entire thing down to half the size because for some reason I just don't have the space to store an 18-inch life-size plastic bird. This is by far my favorite among those models because it looks realistic and most importantly has LEDs on it. I mean, apart from the glowing red LED eyes it looks realistic, the eyes just help to make it creepier, more befitting the occasion. You get the gist. Every single time I'm surprised by just how good this turns out without me putting any effort in. I almost don't want to drill its eyes out to put LEDs in. But in the spirit of Halloween, I had no qualms about that, so here it is fully assembled. This is a great decoration. I even installed a reed switch so I can turn it on and off by swiping a magnet across its back. And there we have it. That's the SP-5 version 3. I really like it. It's a great 3D printer. I certainly cannot fully do it justice without getting all the settings dialed in and actually knowing what I'm doing. This definitely seems to be a do the one thing you're supposed to do well kind of situation. The SP-5 doesn't overwhelm with bells and whistles, but the fact that a 3D printing novice like me can get near perfect parts out of it from the get-go without much head scratching at all is pretty impressive. With everything I made here, I did not have a single print fail, not even a failed first layer. Heck, I wouldn't even be wrong if I said the SP-5 is easier to use than my vanilla paper printer. Is it a good 3D printer for beginners? If you've never seen a 3D printer before and are not used to making stuff, then no. But if you're a maker with a little bit of superficial knowledge about CNC and 3D printing, you should have no problems whatsoever getting the SP-5 set up and printing in a weekend. I'm really impressed by the solid full metal construction, like it's a real machine, not just a desk toy, because apart from the 3D printed fan ducts and the spool holder, there is not a single plastic part on it. Even the hot end covers are sheet metal. The linear guide rails are great to see on a mid-range machine, as are the linked Z-axis lead screws. I never understood why anyone would want those to be separate. So should you buy one? I'm not qualified to judge that. It depends on what you expect from a 3D printer, but if you decide to pick one up, you can use the discount code PYSP to get 14% off via the link in the description. Huge thanks to TwoTrees for sending the SP5 for testing. I definitely had almost too much fun there. Special thank you to all my patrons for the continuing support. Next video, I promise we will print a Benchy on my DIY printer, because I know that's what you all are really waiting for. Hope you enjoyed. Happy Halloween!